we are live back on Only You Know and I Know, which is Dave Mason's occasional Facebook Live talk show. Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Chris.
Dave, we started this a couple of months ago in honor of your release of Alone Together Again, the reimagining of your 1970 classic album, Alone Together. We've had some really special guests on, but I'm not sure anybody quite rises to today's occasion. I am super excited. We've got an old friend of ours here. Would you like to introduce him? Because I know you guys are pals, and I want to get to this conversation fast.
Yes. Well, finally, we dragged him out of hiding. My dear friend, Mr. Mick Fleetwood.
Am I there? I'm here.
Yes. Well, no. Is he up? Is he there?
There we go. Hey, Mick, first of all, thanks for joining us. Dave and I talk a lot about music every couple of weeks. Your name comes up as Dave and I are working on his memoir. We are thrilled that you're here. Dave, you wanted to kind of start off with something right out of the gate, right?
Well, yeah, I know that. I mean, I want to know, and I'm sure everybody else wants to know, is how things and what's happening with your Peter Green special.
Well, at long last, a lot of the history that affected you, thousands of musicians out there. What you were in the middle of suddenly stopped. Right. And happy to say that we're now a year later, but releasing segments of the live show. We're mixing down a long-form documentary, which is really, for me, is like the real storytelling behind the whole show that we put on in London now a little over a year ago. And it was really ostensibly, for me, a tribute to the old band, and more specifically to really acknowledge Peter Green, who anyone out there that doesn't know, often, understandably, people, they see the latter half of the band in the 70s and 80s, and Peter Green formed Fleetwood Mac in 1967 with me and John McVie, and that often gets forgotten about. But more importantly, it was the music that I wanted to revisit. And we had an incredible turnout of people in London, one night to do it, and 3 days later, we were all in a world that was very different. So I'm happy to say that we're now able to really have this thing come to life and show itself a year later, but that's what I'm doing day and night, doing loads of interviews and looking forward to getting on a plane and actually being able to travel.
If people want to see the show on April 24th, they can go to Nugs TV. That's nugs.tv. You can go now. You can buy merch related to the show. You can sign up and buy the show. I'm going to be doing that. So we're all looking forward to that, Mick. Dave, what have you done over there, man? The first time during one of our shows, you picked the guitar up.
Oh, well. When we, Dave and I, shared a stage for many years, and that was one of the songs that we did back then. And we also, on the last Fleetwood Mac tour, we pulled that song out from the archives and had a lot of fun doing that. And of course, that was very much one of the lovely songs that Peter became very well known for. Many a band, many a guitar player worked wonders around what was a sort of really unique riff in many ways, and yeah, it's one of those things that made Peter so special. And we actually got to do part 2 of Oh Well, but it's never been played on stage ever, not even by the original band. And David Gilmour played Oh Well Part 2 during this lovely crazy concert that we put on in London. So that was a very haunting and a very special moment, not only having or Gilmour doing his thing, but truly hearing that song, it was never been played before, ever by Peter, by the band. So that was a thrill.
Mick, I think what you're doing is going to expose him to Green to so many young players that don't know the music. Yeah.
Hang on a minute. Who was in the tribute band?
Well, it was a whole myriad of people. Rick Vito was in the core band, Johnny Lang, David Bronze, keyboard player from the Fleetwood Mac lineup. And off the top of my head, there were so many people on that stage was part of the core band. But at one point, when everyone was on the stage, which was sort of an incredible puzzle getting people in and out, and I think there were about 20 players during that evening. So Andy Fairweather-Lowe was in the core band, David Bronze on bass, both of which played in Eric's band for years. So it was one hell of a rhythm section, and it certainly challenged me to keep my socks up. We're playing with that. Bill Wyman came out for us, playing bass on a couple of songs of Jeremy's, and that was a thrill as well. It just sort of goes on forever in terms of who was participating in it. And I hadn't been on the stage in over 50 years with Jeremy, and when he walked on, he was very shy about even doing it, and I had to sort of coerce him into doing it. But he hit the stage, and everyone, I remember looking at the outtakes of all the players at the side of the stage, and quite a lot of us had our mouths hanging open because he nailed it, and he came through. His voice sounded so good, and of course Jeremy is more than well known as being primarily a very, very fine slide player. As Rick Vito, who was in the core band, is also, so the two of them together was a treat to see so much connected to the original Fleetwood Mac, and Jeremy was a treat for everyone.
Hey Dave, did you see Peter Green back in the day? Because people may not realize that Traffic and Fleetwood Mac basically started at the same time. You both played your first shows in mid-1967. Did you have any opportunity back then to see Peter Green in person yourself, Dave?
I didn't. I mean, we were sort of mixing. We were, and we've been. I mean, you're touching on this stuff. I mean, Mick and I have been throwing around, which maybe we'll get to at some point. The Mick and Dave show, and pretty much take everybody back to those times in England in the 60s when we were starting. I mean, there was truly nothing like it. Probably won't be again like that of that time and that era. And also, as I keep doing interviews, when people ask me, well, how did you get with Hendrix? How did you get with this? How did you do that? The fact of the matter is that you really had so many incredibly talented people musically, all crammed into one place, i.e. London. That was it. So everybody would be there no matter what. So it was very easy to run into people. But Mick, I didn't know back then. The band I knew. Albatross was actually one of my mother's all-time favorite songs.
Really?
Yeah. Great piece. Rick Vito. Mick did a thing at his restaurant, which, by the way, folks, when you get over here to Maui, if you haven't already been, you don't know it, Mr. Fleetwood, yes, Mr. Fleetwood Bonvivant and entrepreneur that he is, has a club and restaurant over in Lahaina, very nice. I recommend you go there. But he did a show of which you never did. You did the whole first album, the entire album, over at the club there.
Wow.
And Rick Vito did Albatross, and it was, it could have been Peter Green. I mean, he had it just nailed. It was fantastic.
Well, again, that era of Fleetwood Mac is there's so many great undiscovered gems that people that first keyed into the 70s, even if they were in the Bob Welsh era, they don't know that great late 60s era. Joe K has a question here he sent in for both of you guys. What's one of each other's favorite songs? Like Dave, one of your favorite Fleetwood Mac songs, and Mick, one of your favorite tunes by Dave. If you had to each pick one of each other's tunes.
Well, if you want me to go, to go for, it'd be hard for me to pick one. I hate doing that.
So many eras.
Yeah, it's hard to
run out in a sweat. The David had too many lovely songs.
Yeah, you're on the line now. But it'd be hard to pick any one tune because, the amazing thing about Mick, period, is that he is sort of steered that whole thing called Fleetwood Mac through so many incarnations. It's amazing.
Well, you mentioned Albatross. That can be your pick if you want.
Albatross, you could take God knows how many songs off Rumors, Rattlesnake Shake.
Mick, what about one of yours of Dave's?
It's your turn.
Yeah. Well, the whole sort of anthem to me, I'd be remiss if Feeling All Right was not the song I would choose, because it literally crossed over to so many interpretations of that song, and you couldn't ever get away from the song. And the lovely thing about it is it appealed to be interpreted by so many different artists. And I think that speaks volumes as to what was that being offered up within the framework of that song was ended up literally being an anthem for a whole generation, truly. So I would pick that song, and there's not a foot, there's not a moment. If there's such a person that happened not to know what that song was and where it came from, it is one of those songs that just translates into anyone's ear. And I've seen it happen, And the only other moment that I have, knowing that there's a generation, this song is just flat out more than famous. So. But there was an old Fleetwood Mac song that I remember, and it was Oh Well, actually, and Tom Petty was playing it in his show, bless his heart, and I had no idea they were going to play it. I don't think any more than maybe, 50 to 100 people in the audience actually knew the song, but it's one of those songs, much like what I'm getting at with David's, that his is a different situation because everyone knows it. But our little taste was, there are certain songs, and Oh Well in our Fleetwood Mac world is not necessarily really that well known. But when you hear it, it translates into the fever, and people just, they feel like they know it, So I think that really communicates. David's very aware of all the lovely people who've covered that song. And getting back to the early days in London, when you would think, I met David really later on, but I was very aware of Traffic. I'll just mumble on here because they were one of the most premier bands that was very different from us, very experimental, and these were the guys that you heard these mystical stories about, where I copied one of the whole way they went off and recorded in the country, and that whole romance. Whether it was completely exclusive, I don't know, but I always remember thinking like, wow, that's so cool to be doing that. And they were sort of groundbreaking innovators, not only with their music, but the whole approach had a lifelong effect. And David, coming out of Traffic, always has that mantle from whence you have come. And it was really a groundbreaking moment. But also it reflects on the fact that you would think we were all hanging out together. Right. Traffic in our minds was like, truly, they were like, oh my God, they're the Cat's Whiskers, and we were a little struggling blues band, which, it all translated in the end. I was talking to David ages ago, and I said, the first time I even saw you, he was down the Speakeasy, which was a club where we all used to go after shows and stuff. And I just remember, like, it was like little fan, really. I'm going like, shit, that's Dave Mason. And he says, you remember that? I remember exactly what he was wearing, and these really like boots like tied up round from the bottom up, these things you get.
Stylish.
Yeah, super stylish. And I didn't dare go up and say hello, but it was like, but that was the, excuse me, that was the funny thing, that we were all sort of really ensconced in what we were doing. And it wasn't till often quite later, not always, but certainly with David and myself. And that's why we enjoyed talking about what was that, the duality of what I was doing, meaning Fleetwood Mac, and then David, not only with Traffic, but also on his own. There's a lovely story that we're hoping to unfold, because we're actually catching up and at the same time explaining what was going on. I mean, you joke about there must have been something in the water to have all this creative.
Probably putting something in the water.
Well, there was a little something in the water, yeah.
Mick, I love that you mentioned Feeling All Right as well, because a lot of people saw last year how you took part in Dave Mason and the Quarantines when you redid Feeling All Right. You and the Doobie Brothers and Sammy Hagar, all these special guests gave that song at a really special time around the world, a whole new life and a whole new energy that I think brought a lot of people together. It was one of the real shining moments out of the whole quarantine situation, and you guys showed everybody how it's done.
Amen. Well, you can't go wrong with that song.
Todd R has a question.
I'll have you know, in terms of when you say you can't go wrong with that song, I also am very aware, and this is meant, and David knows exactly what I'm probably going to say. David runs a very tight ship when it comes to music, and I definitely was aware of wanting to be there and to do it justice. Not only the song, but dear friends. And he's not short of being able to say, Mick, that's not right. I start shaking in my boots.
Hey, you guys, Todd asked a question. Mick, you recently made some news when you talked about a possible Fleetwood Mac family reunion kind of show. If people don't know, you and Dave have a Fleetwood Mac moment in the early 1990s where Dave joins the band. What are your thoughts now about that kind of reunion? Could it be feasible? If you did it, Dave, would you be up for something like that as part of that family?
Well, I guess, I don't know. Winifred, my wife, said that Mick had been tweeting out about something about trying to get all the remaining members of the Mac, something. So
yeah, it's true. I was doing an interview, and I think it's probably what we would call a long shot. But in terms of the aesthetics and the emotional conversation, and it's totally fine to be talking about it, it just seemed so the right thing to have if there's such a thing as anything happening with Fleetwood Mac going into the future. It was sort of a dream machine of mine. I think it's probably a hard push to have it happen, but it was not a conversation that I don't want to talk about. It was just really a wish list, and it seemed with such a strange band, you know. I'm sure David, in his own way, you know, looks. Though I know at certain moments, you go like the elements of traffic, and through the years, maybe not now, but I'm sure that in fact, I know there were people wanting for what was that to actually be able to take the stage and share it. It just seemed like a really generous and appropriate thing to at least dream about doing, because Fleetwood Mac has really owes its whole story to so many people, you know, and that sometimes gets forgotten, which is really why this concert in London was that important. And yes, there are the moments when David shared the stage with Fleetwood Mac for a couple of years at least. Yeah. And these things somewhat get forgotten, somewhat understandably. The enormity of the lineup of Fleetwood Mac, you know, eclipse major parts of a lovely story, and that was where that yen to do that would be a very cool thing to do, and I would like to think that the band is big enough to do something like that, you know. But right now we're just all, you know, just sitting around waiting to do anything at all. David is showing the way in terms of being active, proactive, with being creative at home, like the song that we all did together. A really great moment for me, and a reminder sitting at home that there are things that you can do. We're all really excited about the prospect of playing and haven't given up on it. And we've found different ways of doing it. I'm hearing a really loud...
Yeah.
I am too. I don't know what that is. Is that by you, Dave?
Sounds like a kettle.
No, I don't know what it is.
Oh, there we go.
Sort of gone.
The computer. There we go. Mick, you know, to your credit, I think
shake.
The rattlesnake.
It's rattlesnake shake. That's what it was.
Hey, Mick, I think the mere fact that you kind of put it out there, I think that's how things start. You know, you put it out there in the ether, and sometimes those things take shape. I'm glad you said that. It got a lot of people talking. I thought of Mr. Mason right away. I think it's obviously an incredible idea, and who knows? I mean, don't rule anything out, right? You never know.
I think this is the day and age where that's a very apropos statement. Don't rule anything out, and it's certainly all the way around, you know, just in people's own private lives, professional lives. It is really, we've all been put on the spot to find new ways to express, and also being reflective, and also personally, in so doing, you've had a lot of time to go, you know what, why is that hatchet not buried? And you know, or whatever you want to call it, in many shapes and sizes, not just to do with putting a band together, but I think it's quite thought-provoking, and I think a lot of people have had time to think about things, and that all of those types of sensibilities of bringing together and quite frankly being grateful with the vision that this is all, and it will have passed. And I think a lot of that formula, like people say, well, I can't imagine, such as David, people that are really focused as songwriters, for instance. I'm not one of those people, but I'm a great supporter of it. And when this time period gets unleashed, I can't help but think there's going to be an absolute deluge of expression and songs coming from every which way. So it's pretty fascinating.
I've already started.
Yeah. Well, you never stop.
No, I stopped.
Questions.
I just started again. I just wrote one that I'm still listening to. Like, did I really write that? I wrote a good one.
You can't play it yet, but I got a chance to hear it.
No. I ain't know we could play it yet.
But it's an amazing song. I got a little sneak peek.
It's titled Mangoes.
Hey guys, Kenny has a question. Kenny asks, if either of you could put together an all-star band for one night, living or here on planet, who are 2 or 3 players you guys would choose to be on stage with you?
Oh, well, I want McCartney on bass.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good choice. Good call.
Your turn.
Who else would you want? I know who you want your drummer to be.
Well, maybe not. At least on tambourine. If it's very picky.
No. Well, Mick's up there, of course.
McCartney on bass. Maybe, how about you? If you could bring somebody back, who would you want up there with you?
Well, I actually would choose Mr. McCartney because, in truth, I've not only had the yen to have that happen. I've maybe played once years ago in a stupid Beatles session or something, but I don't really consider it playing. It's more just hanging around. But he always used to joke when those musician polls come out, and back in the day, like in the Playboy musician, whatever it was. And he always, I used to, God knows why, but I would be somewhere in the list of the last 10 drummers or something. Not quite sure how that happened, but he always, when I see him, he's going, Mr. 2 and 4. One day we're going to do this. So I would have to choose. I mean, what a monster songwriter, singer, but like David's choice, an incredible bass player.
Yeah.
Incredibly musical and beyond, and sometimes that gets forgotten in truth, because his songwriting and who he is and that whole enormity. But as a player, he is something else. And John McVie would second that. John is a huge fan of Paul McCartney's bass playing. And
hey, Dave. Daniel had a question here for you. I've wondered about this too. Curious about the quote growl sound in your vocals. You don't hear it as much early on Headkeeper, Never Left, but by Mariposa, by Let It Flow, it's kind of full on. Is that when and why did you develop that kind of vocal style? Because it does become part of the Dave Mason signature sound.
Basically, that's just it's in. Necessity is the mother of invention, and when you've been on the road for days, in a long time, and you eventually can't get those high notes out quite like you used to, then you growl them out. It's a question. That's more a question of overcoming a little bit of a worn out voice is what that is. Mm-hmm. So, but it becomes useful in certain times and places. So, but that's basically how it happened.
Hey, Mick, here's one for you from Daniel about your restaurant. He wants to know if you're the one that came up with the recipe for Mixed Manhattan, the cocktail in your place. Was that you?
No, it wasn't. I would love to take the credit.
Oh, you're supposed to say yes. Absolutely, it was me. Of course,
absolutely. I've had the one or two, that's for sure. But no, being truthful. But I'm like David said, I'm very connected. And we're lucky after being closed, like everything else on the planet, for 7, nearly 8 months. We are now absolutely open and very fortunate that we're in Hawaii here. And in truth, we've been pretty careful and thus lucky to have restaurants more sustained than a lot of other places. So work in progress.
You know, you guys, when you both hit the road early on, Mick with Fleetwood Mac and Dave with Traffic, you come to the States and you play venues that are no longer around. The Fillmore East comes to mind. Mick, I saw a picture recently of you up on stage, I think with the Grateful Dead and a whole sort of cast of characters. Back then you would have this great kind of symbiosis of bands playing together, especially at places like the Fillmore, where the bills were always so diverse. What were those days like for both of you guys, when you could be on a bill with a Miles Davis, or, it was just so the Chambers Brothers, this great mix of artists back then? That had to be incredible as a player to share bills like that with artists like that, was it?
Well, I mean, Bill Graham was a great promoter. And, as time goes by and people say, oh, change. Well, that's okay, but is it changing for the better? And there's a lot of stuff, frankly, at least from my point of view as a musician, that have not changed for the better. Back then, you would have shows like Days on the Green. I did 2 of them.
Mick, you did something too.
But back then, you did shows and the music was diverse. Everything's become like it's this or it's this or it's this or it's this. Not just for the show, but for radio, for everything. Everything's become this little compartmentalized thing. I mean, when Traffic did the first show that we ever did in the U.S. was at the Fillmore East.
Right. And
I don't see much of this go on much anymore. But for us, we wanted to pay homage to our to the things that we'd drawn from, that we loved, because after all, both Mick will agree with me. I mean, we're a couple of Brits, and through, we're very British in a lot of ways. Okay, but if it hadn't have been for America, I don't know. Who knows what we'd be playing? It wouldn't be this. So we just learned from all the American music. So anyway, it's everything's so compartmentalized. So we demanded that we have the staple singers open the show because we loved the staple singers. Back then with Pops and Mavis Staples, and that's who we wanted to open because we just loved that music. That's why when I went out with Steve, took Cropper out on the road. I mean, this is the stuff that we soaked this shit up. We went and looked. We had to go look like blues, more blues tinge like Mick. I mean, you went and looked for things. You went in magazines and you sent to America for the latest release of something. That's when we were young. I mean, that's, they're great stories of how we had got into what we're doing. And hopefully at some point we'll have more time to do that. So, yeah, I mean, those shows, I wish there was more of it. I mean, people don't like just one kind of music. Right. Put some variety up there. Anyway,
Mick, what are your memories of those days? Like, take the Fillmore, for instance, like Dave's talking about. Good memories of those days?
Oh yeah, I'm much the same, and it became there was some element in terms of the way some of the shows were sort of starting to, like a version of promotion copycatting, but going into a thoroughbred. Like Bill Graham and the halls that were really at the beginning of the shows that David's just talking about, and it reminded me of bands that were in touring English bands that went to America. Really, probably the first major band was the Rolling Stones. That they would have Solomon Burke on a show, on a TV show, which was just a pop show, and they would literally insist that these types of artists, their heroes, were on the show, and often said, we don't play unless they're on. And Fleetwood Mac, for instance, in England, B.B. King was huge. We were absolutely just besotted by his band and the whole delivery of who he was and what he'd done. When he came to England, we were blessed with quote, having a tour supposedly, top of the bill. But I remember all of us, very much Peter, said, no, you don't understand. This guy's headlining. and we did a whole European tour with BB headlining.
Wow.
For good reason, because that's what we wanted. That said it all. These were the people that we emulated. These are the people that we paid homage to. And when you're able to do that, now the shows that you're talking about in the States spawned such a melting pot of music. Mm-hmm. I think it is missed. I was joking the other day, I forget who it was, but under the heading of that, there are 1,001 bands that are going to hit the road all in one go. It's going to happen. So I'm actually was talking about, I think there'll be an onslaught for maybe more of that type of an approach, where otherwise there's going to be a queue for like 4 or 5 years before everyone could get on the same stages. So I think the festival part of it and bands being able to get out there when this all opens up, I think actually you will get, for how long it lasts, I'm not sure, but straight out of the gate, that's a way of solving the problem, because I think we're all saying would be more than willing to have those types of shows happen, because otherwise no one's going to get a crack at the whip and are going to be standing in a queue waiting to play all the venues,
That's a very smart take. I think you're exactly right. And to your point, Mick, I didn't know the B.B. King story. It's sort of like Brian Jones making sure that Howlin' Wolf's got to play on Ready Steady Go or whatever. That insistence of doing it, that you all did that, I think is really important. Like Traffic ordering up at the Staple Singers, that's amazing. And maybe we'll get back to some of that shared space like that.
It would be, I guess the point to it more is also, I don't see the young bands in any way doing that. I haven't seen anything. I have not, I haven't seen that happen. So it was a different thing, because, I think, young musicians, from whence Mick and I come, we're back from the days where, we were upstairs in bed with our little crystal radio, trying to tune in Radio Luxembourg and the Armed Forces so we could hear some decent music, because it was just the BBC. So, things are very easy for people today. For us, it was a passion. We really went, if you compare it to today, we really went out of our way to be what we're doing. We really did. And winging a prayer, basically. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. Good luck. Here we go.
Do you guys remember playing together in the 70s in terms of Fleetwood Mac and Dave Mason? You must have been on the same bill at some point, right? I would imagine at a stadium show, A Day on the Green or something.
Shows together. Fleetwood Mac, I think back somewhere in the different places. Before Rumors, I think they were, they opened for me. I wrote for them. I did a last minute thing with them out of the blue. I think at the Forum, just acoustic, with the damn place sold out. Very
amazing. You mentioned something earlier. You talked about Traffic and how they were out at the cottage doing their thing, kind of communal away. Were you referring to Kiln House in terms of you sort of adopting that approach?
Totally.
Was that that's really cool. I never put that together.
That's quite perceptive, even to that. That's not one of our super well-known albums, but
it's a great album. It's a really great album.
Great album, and I get it. And it was we were all in a state of complete flux. That was when Peter Green left, and the truth of the matter is we're all petrified in various ways, but still with the intention of keeping going. And that's exactly the formula where, for me, I thought if we don't commune as a band literally living together. And I took that template absolutely from my memory of what the romance of what happened with Traffic. And there were a couple of other bands that would do such like. That was our first, and it worked because we lived in a house all together, and we were not able to drift. I knew that if we all went off in our different flats and licking our wounds and so forth, pretty much, I think without that formula of shoving everyone really with no option other than just to play music, survive, we wouldn't have survived. So that's very much what I did. And I used that formula years later when things were very sticky with Fleetwood Mac, no secret. Everyone was very unhappy, and we were starting the second album with Stevie and Lindsay and Chris and John and myself, which turned out to be Rumors. I knew for sure that it smelt very much like In the Ranks that when Peter left. Mm-hmm. And everyone was very unhappy, and you're going, how on earth are we going to sustain and concentrate on the music when everything is divided like this? And I took the band out of LA absolutely with the same formula, which I used in truth 3 or 4 times. But that was a major, and shoved everyone in Sausalito. Wow. All the guys were in a house together. The girls lived in their own house on the in Sausalito Harbor there, and we convened in the studio, and that's how I think the band did not break up. I really believe that, which is the same. It's the same formula of it, and it's also touching on several times during this conversation. David has absolutely said these are different times, and I don't know whether these things translate with demographics of younger players that have a different approach to where they did their homework, where they did their boot camp or whatever it was. And like David mentioned, on A Wing and a Prayer, there was a fraternity, if you like, that brought bands together where you wouldn't dream of, you go, can I come around and at least listen to the album or the single? And it would be like, but you're not going to take it home. And, it was like, okay. And then there was all this changing around and exchanging of information that actually was real. And it's like talking about Paris in the 20s. There was something that really happened. And that's what happened, not only just in London, but certainly England. When you look at what it spawned, it was all about, and with huge respect, from the irony was all of this deluge of music came ostensibly, we know, from the United States of America, reinterpreted, taken back, and certainly for a blues band, early Rolling Stones with Chuck Berry, and it was sort of ironic that, taking Coles to Newcastle and reinventing these songs, which was the best we could do to get as close as to something that we love so much. The irony was, and the lovely thing was, I think it really, really, it is fair to say, spawned a whole new interest in American rock and roll, and the appreciation that I think we can take some credit. And it's a very odd story that we went back to the United States of America and woke people up. Woke people up. This is your heritage. And I think we can all have our stories, and people, Eric and Cream and the Yardbirds, Eric Burden, Animals, a whole slew of bands that came with a representation of huge influence that came from the United States. That in itself is hours of lovely talking. and it's also an interesting thing that David touched on, is like, what was that going on in England? Because there are so many stories to be told by not just David and myself, but that really it's a magical moment that needs not to be forgotten about, and
Well,
it's
fascinating. You've both referenced the fact that you're thinking about putting your heads together and coming up with some kind of program that will allow you both to delve into what London was like in the 60s, these blues roots, all these, and you're both incredible storytellers. You both lived it. You're both responsible in large part for why music flourished the way it did, starting in the late 60s all the way through today. So I hope you guys get to that, because this is a little taste. We're going to wrap up in a second, but just the little taste you guys provide of going back in time and talking about the Fillmore East, talking about B.B. King, talking about why you did Killing House the way you did. It all flows from that same appreciation of roots music and really the heart and source of it. So I will keep my fingers crossed you guys do it, because, again, it's a pleasure listening to both of you. I want to say that before we go, I want to remind everybody, April 24th, Mick's incredible show, Mick Fleetwood and Friends Celebrate the Music of Peter Green. If you go to nugs, nugs.tv, you can order the show. You can buy, they've designed really cool merch that has that 1960s flavor that's really beautiful and collectible. So you want to check that out. Mick, that was amazing that you did that last year. I can't wait to see the show. It's really going to be a great watch, I'm sure. And Dave, you're making new music. You and I are getting your book all wrapped up. I think both of you this coming year is going to be very exciting. Lots of things going on. 2 winners, by the way, today, Todd and Daniel, for your great questions. You want to go to, you want to write info@davemason.com, Todd and Daniel, and declare yourselves as the winners, and you get some cool Dave Mason signed merch. Guys, anything you want to close with today? We've got a lot of people watching today that I'm sure we could go on and on and on, but I want to be respectful of your time. Any closing words to the people watching right now?
Well, I mean, obviously, I want to thank Mick for, taking the time out to come chit-chat, and Chris, as always. And it's great, and I feel great, and got a second injection the other day, so hey, I'm going to be good to go.
Fantastic. Well, I want you part. If Mick does the family reunion Fleetwood Mac tour, Dave, you've got to be a part of it. So let's get you on record right now that you're interested in that.
I'm going to do it if it should happen and it comes about. Yeah, of course I'm going to do it.
Mick, how about you? What do you want to tell people today as we sign off?
Well, I think I touched on I ramble on a bit, but I think this whole period, seeing how it affected everyone, we know that, but we're 2 musicians, we're all talking about music, and I think it's really exciting and challenging that the storytelling that will come out of this, I think will for sure be very powerful. I think some of the elements that we may have touched on, and David mentioned, feels in certain ways are elusive to certain understandably younger musicians, etc. But what it's done, I think it's really put everyone under a certain type of creative microscope. Is like where they are sharing, they are potentially sharing more in theory, and this is this conversation, the fact that you can't go out and do what we normally do. Everyone is finding different ways to share their information, and I think it's actually the upside of it. I think will be a healthy creative injection into the music business, because I think it's coming out of everyone understanding that we've been very vulnerable, and knowing you're able to do this again, which we will, but knowing there are times when you thought it may not be the case, it has made everyone, I think, very open to being a little bit more gracious towards what I would hope would be a lovely chemistry of creativity. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And it sort of encompasses my wish list that happened to be spoken about Fleetwood Mac. I think there are things that need to disappear in order for things to happen in a much more holistic way.
The wonderful kind of 1960s attitude. It's nice to go back to that feeling of openness and an invitation, and I think you're right, Mick. I'm Chris Epting. I want to thank, of course, Dave Mason, this edition of Only You Know and I Know, our super special guest, Mick Fleetwood. Mick, thanks so much, man. I'm going to go play Kiln House. I'm going to put on Kiln House and the first Traffic album back to back, and now I can imagine what inspired each other there. So thank you for that. Guys, thank you, Dave, as always. We'll see you all again soon. Thank you all for watching. And we'll see you all soon.